Next up, we have Sabrina Krakau.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm from QBiC, the Quantitative Biology Center, which is the bioinformatics core facility of the University of Tübingen. And I'm super happy to share with you our recent work on a new Nextflow plugin called NF CO2 footprint, which is to estimate the carbon footprint of pipeline runs. So why is this important? First of all, because in general, data analysis, but also in particular bioinformatic analysis, are contributing considerably to the human emissions of greenhouse gases and thus also to global warming. And I would like to give you an idea about the impact of this. So I would like to show you a few examples of a recent publication by Grayley et al. And they showed, for instance, that a de novo assembly of the human genome from Illumina reads generated roughly 15 kilograms of CO2 equivalents. So maybe a brief explanation about this metric CO2 equivalent. This is used for a better comparison between different greenhouse gases. So if other types of greenhouse gases are generated, this is converted to the amount of CO2 which would have the same impact on global warming. So back to this 15 kilograms of CO2 equivalents, this would be comparable to driving 68 kilometers by car within Europe. The authors further estimated that a metagenome assembly from 100 soil samples generated an amount of 77 kilograms of CO2 equivalent, and this would be comparable to driving 440 kilometers by car. So this should be addressed somehow. And in order to do this, we, on the one hand, need to increase the general awareness about this, and importantly also to deepen the understanding of which are the most influencing factors here. So for this, we need to estimate the carbon footprint based on an estimation of the energy consumption. And since actually tracking the real power consumption is coming with its own challenges, I will focus here on a method which estimates the energy consumption. And in this context, I would like to highlight the Green Algorithm project. This is a pretty nice project which was developed by Loïc Lane-Longue from the University of Cambridge, Jason Grayley and Michael Inhoye. And they developed an online calculator, which is called the Green Algorithms Calculator, which you can see here. And you can provide the resources which were used by your computation or your algorithm, such as time and so on, and also specify some details about the underlying hardware and where your computations were run. And then it estimates the energy that was needed for this and also the carbon footprint. And since these numbers are relatively difficult for most of us to interpret, they also provide some nice equivalence values for a better interpretability. So for example, how long does a tree need to sequester this amount of CO2 again? How far could you travel by car and how far by train? So this tool is pretty nice. We used this at the beginning of the year already to estimate manually the carbon footprint of some Nextflow runs we had. And then it became apparent that it should be somehow implemented and used for Nextflow as well. So first, I would like to show you how the actual underlying method works. Here you can see the equation. So one can compute the carbon footprint or the amount of CO2 equivalent by using the energy that was needed for the computation and then also the carbon intensity of the respective energy production or power generation. And the energy needed, in turn, can be estimated with this relatively simple formula. So we first need the running time. Then the formula also contains a term describing the power draw of the whole processor. This comprises the number of cores which were used, the usage factor, and also the power draw for one individual core. And these values or approximations for this can typically be retrieved from the manufacturers. Additionally, the formula contains a term describing the power draw for the memory. This comprises the actual available memory in gigabytes as well as the power draw per gigabyte. And in this context, it might be worth noting that there's no usage factor included in this part because from the power consumption of the actual memory, this is mainly independently of if the memory is actually used or not. Additionally, the formula contains a term called PUE value, which stands for power usage effectiveness, and this describes the efficiency of the data center. This is important because the data center does not only require energy for your actual computations, but also for cooling down the whole system, for example. And last but not least, it's also including a pragmatic scaling factor, which includes the fact that most of the algorithms are run multiple times before the actual final results can be generated. And when looking at this formula, we can see already what are the main important factors which are contributing to this. So first of all, the efficiency of our computations, so how much time, memory, and how many cores do we need. But also the requested resources. So for example, if we over-allocate memory, this has a bad impact. Then the efficiency of the data center is important, the PoE value. So larger, more optimized data centers usually have a lower PoE value, and also the behavior of the user is important, of course. If we look at the actual carbon footprint, which is resulting, for this also the carbon intensity plays a big role, and this carbon intensities depend on the actual sources of the energy mix which is used. And this hugely varies between different geographic locations, but also within time. And there are different data sources contributing or having such carbon intensities over different regions. And the green algorithms calculator, for example, uses a relatively or a bit more static version, since this is also only applied after the actual computation. However, there's also a source called the electricity maps, which provides real-time data and also some nice visualizations, as you can see here. And when I checked a couple of days ago, just to show you an example how big the difference of these values can be, in Sweden there was a carbon intensity of 12 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, while at the same time the value in Queensland in Australia was 682. So this shows how huge the difference can be, which is mainly caused because Queensland relies on coal while Sweden uses mainly renewable energy sources. So with this we have seen the underlying method and which type of data sources are important for this context. So we made use of these methods and implemented this into a new Nextflow plugin, which is called NF CO2 footprint. And this is basically using the same underlying equation, just that we use this for each, compute this for each task of the pipeline on the fly while making use of the Nextflow trace matrix. So which matrix are we actually using? So we use the real time, then the number of CPUs, the percentage of the CPUs which are used by the tasks. Then we added also a new entry to this trace matrix called CPU model, which contains information about the actual model, which can be used to retrieve the model-specific power draw values. For this, we make use of data which was provided by and collected already by the Green Algorithms project, and we also make use of the memory which was requested. So these are the trace matrix, which are the values of the plugin, which are automatically obtained during the run. Then the plugin also comes with some configurable parameters. First of all, the power draw from the memory per gigabyte. This was estimated to be, in the past, to be a relatively constant value across different types of memories. So for this, we can simply use this default value. Then the efficiency of the data center, so the PoE value is important. There it might make sense to retrieve this value from the actual data center. And further, the users can also provide a carbon intensity value, which is in case they have custom one, or apply or provide a geographic location. And in this case, again, data from the Green Algorithms project is used in order to then retrieve a location-specific CI value. So this is the main basic concept of this plugin. It then generates multiple different output files, importantly an HTML carbon footprint report. So this provides some general information about the whole pipeline run, for example, the total CO2 emissions of the whole pipeline run, the energy which was consumed, and similar to the Green Algorithms calculator, also some equivalence values. So how many tree months would this correspond to, and how many kilometers by car, etc. It also comes with, includes a few plots, for example, a plot showing the CO2 equivalent distributions across different processes, so that we can see on the first view which processes have the main impact in this case. And of course, it also provides detailed information about each individual task. We also applied this already and tested this for the NF Core Mag pipeline. This pipeline is for metagenome assembly and binning, and we run this on our local compute cluster while requesting different numbers of CPUs for the metagenome assembly step, which was performed with spades. And you can see here the resulting, first the resulting carbon footprint, then the real times and memory values, used memory values across different numbers of CPUs. And what we can see here is that when we look at the carbon footprint, the value is first going down for an increasing number of CPUs and then going up again. And the reason for this is that the decrease in the actual running time does not compensate anymore for the higher energy consumption due to the higher number of CPUs. So this shows that this can be and should be used to optimize also the pipeline settings in order to reduce the carbon footprints. And with this, I'm already slowly coming to an end. So to conclude, once this will be released, this will be super easy to use, and we hope to increase the incentive to reduce the carbon footprint of pipeline runs. And we think this will also help the user to optimize the pipeline settings, to carefully select the data center, and to reduce the number of runs, at least where possible. It's already available, and we also set up some brief documentation already about the important parameters and how you could already test this even prior to release in case you're interested in. And also there's a Slack channel in the NF Course workspace in case you have any questions, feedback, or if you want to contribute. Beside the release, the next steps would be to include a more fine-grained real-time carbon intensity data, such as you showed you for the electricity maps. Then to add also support for cloud systems. And finally, it would be also nice if this will work for the Zikara platform to monitor the carbon footprints for multiple ones, and also to recommend eco-friendly pipeline settings or even to automatically optimize this in the future. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. Importantly, Julia Mir for contributing. So both of us are the main developers so far. Then Loic and his colleagues from the Green Algorithms project for previous work and sharing the data. Then Phil and Paolo, of course, for many contributions, help, and suggestions. And thanks again.
We have a few questions here, and thankfully a couple of minutes for that. Would it be possible for this to support GPUs as well, not just CPUs, for the plugin? For the plugin, does it support GPUs as well?
It does not support GPUs yet, so this is an open to-do. It was also, since recently, the Nextflow trace matrix did not support GPUs also in the past, so, but yeah, it's a to-do.
The other question coming from Chris, would it make sense to take into account in the formula for the energy, the cost of manufacturing the processor instant machine type?
The embodied emissions for the hardware, or what?
Yes, so the formula to include, to calculate also like the type of machine or how expensive it was to manufacture it.
Yeah, so far this is all embodied emissions are not included in this formula, and also no, for example, storage is also not included because this is really focusing on the actual pipeline one. But it could, of course, be extended in the future for different factors.
The other question is kind of in similar mode. Does this support different architectures, like ARM versus the x86 and like different architecture of the machines?
Yeah, so there are power draw values, for example, like for this we need the information about the hardware, and if there's no if there's no information about this provided, then we need to fall back to some reasonable default settings, and this is an open to do also to include more data about this in the future.
The other question comes from Max. Would it be realistic to move computations to low CO2 intensive regions? And what do you think are the possible opportunities and hindrances in this?
So the first part.
So if you are to use this to move the computations to the low intensive CO2 regions.
Yeah, this is of course like one conclusion one could get to see, okay, in which regions would this be more efficient to compute, while also, of course, taking into account the PoE of the data center. So these are two factors which should be considered together. for this aspect.
Another question is, what is the cost of carbon footprint when using the NF2 or footprint?
Of running the actual, it should not be too high. We tried to make it as efficient as possible. I mean, as I said, it's using the already recorded metrics, which are already there, and just summing them up and using a relatively easy equation. But we could measure this, of course, in the future.
Adrian is asking, in your experience, what are the least and the most carbon-intensive pipelines?
I did not apply this to too many pipelines, but the meta-genome assembly pipeline, for example, I mean, it depends on the input data. I mean, I run it on the Mac pipeline using the full-size test data set, but this is still, compared to the most real data, still relatively simple. But if one would include, for example, as in the introduction said, 100 soil samples, this would be massive.
Great, and let's go for maybe one last question. Give me 1 second, sorry. A lot of it is about, like, a lot of the questions coming through are about whether or not we can use this for the Segura platform as well. So I think that's a question not directed at you, but I think we've gotten most of them, so we're good.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
a lot again.